What's going on, everybody? It is that time again, the Sooners Illustrated podcast, episode 188 on this Thursday, July 3rd, 2025. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a Thursday, 58 days from the season opener, Oklahoma, Illinois State on August 30th. We're into the 50s. We're into July. Got some recruiting stuff to catch up on as per usual with our guy Collin Kennedy here. Getting you on your way into your 4th of July weekend, coming at you a little bit earlier on a Thursday, just getting you a little jump on the holiday weekend. Obviously, we will catch up on a little bit of Deacon Schmitt, get Collin's thoughts there on the addition and kind of what that means for Oklahoma's offensive line class. Then we've got a slew of updates on both 2026 guys and some 2027 as well. Some wide receiver names to know, some update on some decisions coming up. And like I said, we'll even get into a little 2027 after Collin was at some 7-on-7 stuff over the weekend. So a lot to get into on a Thursday, send you on your way into your 4th of July weekend. CK, let's go ahead and start with Deacon Schmitt. We talked about him going into the decision, and obviously James and Tom and I touched on him briefly on Monday, but they bring him in, the Colorado product. He's a composite 4-star offensive lineman, the composite #1 player in the state of Colorado. Picks the Sooners over in-state, the Buffaloes, and Alabama was also in that final 3. He joins Noah Best and Bill Bedenbaugh's offensive line crop in 2026. Just talk about the addition and what kind of player Deacon can be down the road, and I guess how this offensive line group is kind of forming a little bit. Obviously, Will Conroy flip to North Carolina, but you added Noah Best, and now you got Schmitt in there as well. Kind of paint a picture on all of it for us as Oklahoma brings Deacon Schmitt into the party. Over the weekend.
Yeah, so let's dive in quickly as far as how this one got done. Yeah. I think a key stretch of note is obviously Oklahoma has prioritized Deacon Schmitt for a very long time. This is someone who took, if I remember correctly, a couple of in-season visits to Norman for some game day atmospheres, and Bill Bedenbaugh has been running point on this recruitment with Schmitt and his family for a very long time. This is one of Bill Bedenbaugh's favorite players in the 2026 class, and I think that this new front office staff supported his view of Deacon Schmitt. And I think it all kind of came to a head when a couple weeks back, a key domino fell whenever Alabama landed a offensive line commitment in the 2026 class. I want to say in early June, if I remember correctly. And why that is of note, Oklahoma had been recruiting him hard. Alabama had been recruiting him hard. Colorado the same.
Yeah.
But I think that there was a stretch there where some behind the scenes were under the impression that this one would come down to Alabama and Oklahoma, and that Alabama was very high on Schmitt as well. Then Alabama adds another 2026 offensive line commit who is a tackle to guard flexibility kind of guy. And once that addition went into the fold for the Crimson Tide, I think that Alabama staff looked at its current 2026 offensive line haul and said, all right, we like a couple of our guys who can play both tackle and guard in this current commit class. Let's go ahead and start emphasizing other position groups, which then led to this being an Oklahoma-Colorado race. And I think another very important layer to this, and I think I've talked about this in the past before, but the Buffs are recruiting, especially in the state of Colorado, at a different level than they ever really have before, right? I want to say you said this the other day. This is not your father's Colorado.
Yeah, right.
The Buffs under Deion Sanders, I mean, they are positioning themselves to be in some of the highest level recruitments out there. Obviously, they got Jordan Seaton a cycle or two ago, a 5-star offensive lineman that I was thoroughly impressed with seeing in person. And I think ever since they got Seaton on that roster, it's kind of like, okay, Colorado's going to be able to get big men, and they're going to be able to finally build up that offensive line long term. And this specific cycle is obviously relatively plentiful in terms of offensive linemen in the state of Colorado with connections to the program. Deacon Schmitt and Brett Collegier in that group. And I think a very big deal was Matt McChesney, who is Deacon Schmitt's trainer, one of the best offensive line trainers in all of America, probably the world, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
He resides in Colorado, played at Colorado, played offensive line for the Buffs, and now he runs the 6-0 Academy out there in Colorado, which trains offensive and defensive linemen. But McChesney is understandably around the Colorado program a ton, and he's very close with Coach Prime and a lot of members of that staff. He is someone who I would say Colorado rightfully leans on to help with recruiting to a degree, but also McChesney is his own guy, and he's his own offensive line mind, and why I feel he's so important. He not only helped build Deacon Schmitt into the player he is today, he is someone who vocally supported offensive line coach Bill Beanbo at Oklahoma. And when you have a guy like that in Deacon Schmitt's camp advocating for your offensive line coach out there, especially, again, someone who has connections to the other program in the mix, like that's a big deal. And I think it all kind of combined to have Deacon Schmitt trust Bill Beanbo, this Oklahoma front office, and the Oklahoma staff, and where this program is heading. And then the last thing I would say as far as how this thing got done, within 24 hours of new quarterback commit Bo Bentley making his pledge official, he obviously tweeted out about all those receivers, but he was on Instagram talking about Deacon Schmitt and sharing some of Deacon's posts and emphasizing that offensive line recruit specifically. And I think Deacon Schmitt and Bo Bentley became close pretty quickly once Bo Bentley made the decision to join OU's class. And now, obviously, Deacon Schmitt says Bo Bentley needs his bodyguard. So that's kind of a brief summation, as I can be, about how I feel this timeline played out. This guy is extremely talented. Like I mentioned, can play tackle, can play guard. I think that I really like him as a potential right tackle of the future, especially because I think if you're an Oklahoma fan, Josh, like you're really excited about Ryan Foje and Deacon Schmitt kind of being the building blocks of your offensive line on the right side. One could play right guard. One could play right tackle. You've got your left tackle of the future, Michael Fasusi. The offensive line of the future in Norman is rounding out to shape right now, right? And I think Deacon Schmitt is going to be a big part of that. And overall, it's a really big get. And I think a lot of things went the right way for Oklahoma to get this one done.
You kind of touched on it. How did you kind of surmise where the offensive line class is, I guess, for lack of a better way to formulate that sentence? I mean, you got Noah Best in there. Like we said, Will Conroy had previously flipped over to North Carolina. Desmond Green landed with Florida late last week. I guess for you, with these two guys, pairing with what they had the previous cycle, like you just mentioned with Foje and Fasusi in that group, I guess kind of a little temperature check for you, offensive line recruiting wise. And is there more names you think could be added? Is it going to be just these two? I mean, it's early July, so there's still certainly time. I guess just kind of a little stop it on offensive line recruiting in this cycle for you right now.
Yeah, I love the direction of Oklahoma's offensive line through the recruiting ranks, because I think it's so important right now to analyze the direction of this group through the context of various recruiting cycles.
Sure.
Obviously, last year, 2025 was kind of the year of the offensive line. It was a historic offensive line class, specifically at offensive tackle. 9 offensive linemen, 5 stars, 8 of them offensive tackles. Oklahoma got the top guy in that historical class. And then obviously the year before, in 2024, that was when Oklahoma kind of went out and got a ton of really talented bodies and guys like Eddie Pierre-Louis and Daniel Akinkunmi and some of these other young offensive linemen that are still developing. OU went out and got some transfer portal bodies to fortify the front for now, but then also allow some of those guys to build behind them into the future. And then, look, and I've said this again, you have to understand the cyclical nature of recruiting. We've talked about it in the past. 2026 is just, it's not a very deep offensive line cycle, especially in the South Central region where Oklahoma is going to make a living. And I also think it's important to note that 2027 is quite the opposite. 2027 is going to be a loaded offensive line class, specifically in the states of Oklahoma and Texas. And so if you're OU, thinking back to the past few cycles, forward thinking into 2027 and then understanding what's in front of you here in 2026, like, to go out and get a guy that in Deacon Schmitt has legitimate multi-year starter upside for you at right tackle and right guard, to get Noah Best, who I think has the chance to play any one of all three interior positions. Like, these two bring a lot of flexibility and talent, and they're both high-level, high-character, high IQ guys off the field as well. And so it's basically what I'm trying to say is, like, you only are given the puzzle pieces you're able to use, right?
Sure.
Like,
right.
It's about making sure you're putting the right ones together at the right time. And I think that understanding what 2026 is, but then also what 2025 and 2024 were and what 27 could be, like, this is all coming together really well. In 26, the other layer to your question, if I'm Oklahoma, like, Devin Robeson, obviously off the TCU, you mentioned Desmond Green, some of these other guys, Will Conroy flips to UNC. I've mentioned this on our board. I would not blame this front office staff one bit if they looked around and said, acknowledging everything we just talked about, let's take these two guys, maybe add a body in the portal if we need it, because we're in a good spot, right? Like, from a future building perspective, we're fine. And it's tricky because when you're dealing with the cyclical nature of recruiting, the folks out there that are in these recruit camps, they're obviously not going to acknowledge it. If they're ranked higher because it's maybe a down year, they're going to, let's just be honest, get paid like that player. But not every number one player is created equally, just like every number 82 overall player in the country is not created equally given a certain cycle. So I don't necessarily think that right now Oklahoma's staring down the barrel of any 100% certain decisions on the offensive line in 26. I could see them watching the landscape and maybe pressing harder down the stretch for maybe a couple of names if they really like them. Maybe that's through senior eval or later identification on the board. I don't know. But I think right now what you got to acknowledge is, again, in a down offensive line cycle in 26, you got two guys who you can really like a lot. And I think you really have to appreciate that, especially because, again, these were relatively heated recruitments. You ended up winning out.
Absolutely. As far as other 2026 names to know, obviously there are still a lot of decisions hanging out there. Schmitt, the 14th commit in the 26 cycle. Obviously, Oklahoma's going to still look to add quite a few more here. You would imagine. Let's talk about wide receivers first. This is a position that is very intriguing, I think, for most. You still have Daniel Odom, right? It seems like Oklahoma's done a good job positioning themselves to keep him. After, there was a thought at the time, like maybe, if Jaden O'Neal leaves, he would maybe just go with them, wherever that may be, Florida State, whatever. He's still around for now, and it sounds things have been positive there. You've had Dallas Dickerson land at Kentucky. You've had Craig Dandridge land at Georgia. You, Collin, you touched on earlier, Bo Bentley tweeting about all those wide receivers. Where are you kind of staying with a lot of them as far as Oklahoma trying to maybe add? Because right now it's just Odom, right? He's the only guy in this cycle right now, but there are other big names still hanging out there. A little check-in for you on the wide receiver recruiting part of it right now, because, again, there are some big names hanging out there, but also you only have one in the boat as of now with Odom. And like we said, Dandridge off the board, Dickerson off the board. Where are you kind of stand with wide receivers specifically right now in 26?
Yeah, I think that if you're Oklahoma, this is another one where you survey the landscape, and unless there are a couple of guys that you really want to press for in the back end of the cycle, if I'm OU, I'm going, all right, let's get like two more guys in here with Daniel Odom, because I would call that a recruiting win, seemingly on track to keep him in the class when that felt like almost an impossibility a couple months ago.
Right.
And so building off of that, the two names that I think you have to dig into specifically right now are Jordan Clay and Davian Gross. So here's why you subscribe to Sooners Illustrated out there, folks. The other day I put on the board, and you can join us for $1 for your first month right now. I try to take some unorthodox approaches, maybe some actions that you don't necessarily see all that common out there. So the other day, I'm out at the Texas 7-on-7 state championships in College Station, melting, and I'm standing there watching a couple of games, and it clicks to me like, hey, I've got a pretty good relationship, and I have a pretty solid awareness of the individual that is Baylor's 2026 quarterback commit, Quinn Murphy. So I'm standing there watching him throw to Cooper Witten, who we'll talk about here in a second. And I'm going, like Oklahoma's battling Baylor for a ton of guys right now.
Yeah.
Let me just go ask their quarterback who he thinks they're going to get. So went over to Quinn, pulled him aside. We'd met before and got him on record the other day saying a little bit of something about Baylor's pursuit of some of the same targets at wide receiver for Oklahoma. So let me pull up the exact quote here and let's see, Josh. Again, I like to get Josh in here to give the typical takeaway. This is the exact quote that I got from Quinn Murphy the other day. Let's see. Where did the quote go? Someone deleted it. Okay, so basically what Quinn Murphy said to me was, hey, we're going after Jordan Clay and Chase Campbell. Chase Campbell is not a name we've brought up here on the show in the past. However, he kind of has the ability to create a domino effect, and why I feel this way. Baylor right now has two pretty talented receivers already committed. They're on the hunt for a couple more guys like Jordan Clay, Davian Gross, and then Chase Campbell. Now, if I told you that Quinn Murphy, the first two names he brought up were Jordan Clay and then Chase Campbell and not necessarily Davian Gross, that would tell you, okay, maybe they feel a little bit better about those two over Davian Gross. That's the current impression that I have. That being said, Chase Campbell is getting ready to decide here pretty soon between Baylor, Texas Tech, and Kansas State. I believe that if he were to go to Baylor and maybe Jordan Clay were to end up at Baylor, that would create a clear runway for OU to soar in the recruitment of Davian Gross. However, we're currently hearing that Chase Campbell's probably more of a Texas Tech lean, which in turn would make you think, and I do have this on pretty good authority, that Baylor would then pivot and kind of go all in on trying to get Jordan Clay and Davian Gross. That hangs in the balance currently, and I think that's important because starting with Gross, we have heard that this is kind of the commitment territory for him. He's wanted to get something done here in early July. That's been his preference. However, if this dynamic is hanging out there and he's still relatively undecided, we don't have an exact timeline. How much further does that go? And does that help or hurt Oklahoma? If Davian Gross does in fact make a decision in early July, I personally believe that would favor Oklahoma. The longer this goes, the more time Baylor has to make this interesting, and they've made it interesting up until this point, don't get me wrong, then anything goes, especially because on the other hand, I think Oklahoma and Baylor are kind of flipping roles here with Jordan Clay. So Jordan Clay is getting ready to decide in mid-July. I want to say July 11th. I think Baylor has led for Jordan Clay for months. And I think Baylor is kind of in a situation where if the Bears did not get Jordan Clay, they would be pretty surprised. Oklahoma is trying to surprise Baylor actively. And I think that those conversations are ongoing. I think Jordan Clay is lending a listening ear maybe more than ever before because of the way the OV went and now some of the conversations that are being had behind the scenes. But Quinn Murphy did say, like, we should be getting some good news here pretty soon. Don't want to reveal too much, but I feel good about some potential new additions to Baylor's 26 class. Whenever he put that on record in the story I put out the other day, I took that to mean he felt pretty good about Jordan Clay specifically, with that decision date set and on the horizon. So I know that's a lot of, like, connecting the pictures on the wall with the red string and the pins, and it's a lot of maniacal word salad, but like these guys are kind of all intertwined. And I think Baylor and Oklahoma are both really battling for specifically Clay and Gross. I have long felt like they would probably split those two. However, naturally, each program would like them both. If I had to guess where this goes, I would guess Gross goes to Oklahoma and Clay probably goes to Baylor. That being said, if he's podcasting on, or if he's committing on the 11th and we podcast before that, wouldn't shock me if I'm sitting here on the show next week going, Oklahoma might pull this off, because those are some of the conversations being had behind the scenes. So receiver recruiting, it has been a highly discussed topic on the message board these days and in the social media spheres. The good news is, and I said this on the board the other day, this is set to get wrapped up, you would think, over the next week or so. And if that does happen, I think that would be welcomed by all parties involved, from Gross and Clay to Baylor and Oklahoma.
No, it's all really interesting, because, like you said, finding a way to keep Odom, big win. If that's the way it goes. And it sounds pretty positive from everything that you've reported and just kind of the general sense that I've gotten there. And obviously that's a guy that's one of the higher rated guys in the class, period. Right. And he's your only wide receiver right now. So doing that is step one, but then step two is like, you want to try to round out this group. I mean, you have a couple of freshmen coming in that you like, and, Manny Choice and Elijah Thomas, who had great springs and everything like that. But like, you want to continue to build out that position. And, like I mentioned, Dandridge goes to Georgia, Dickerson, they kind of cooled on there. He went to Kentucky. Like, okay, that's all fine if you add guys, but it's like, if Gross and Clay both end up at Baylor, we'll say, where does that leave you, right? As you try to get some wide receiver bodies in here. So it's going to be interesting. And, it's a position that, like you said, has been kind of a hot button topic in this cycle. And, maybe get some resolution here soon on a couple of names that we've brought up, several times here on the show. So an interesting position for Emma Jones, interesting cycle, obviously, for Emma Jones. It's been kind of topsy-turvy a little bit.
Yeah.
26.
I'm an idiot. I went to the wrong story. I found the quote that I was going to read, but this is
there you go.
So we're going to roll with the flow here. There's a lot going on right now. My mind is a little bit scattered. This is the quote I was going to read here on the show. Quote, I think this class is going to be one that people remember for a really long time. This is Baylor 2026 quarterback commit Quinn Murphy talking.
Mm-hmm.
Two receivers that come to mind for me, Jordan Clay and Chase Campbell. I've been after them hard. Should be some good news coming here pretty soon. I don't want to say too much, but I think this class is going to be really special, end quote. Maybe you have the same takeaway I had in that moment, but it feels like Baylor and Quinn Murphy knows something that we are probably putting together as well. However, in a world where really anything can change last minute in today's era of recruiting, you got to kind of let this stuff play out. And I want to reiterate, like, from what we've heard, Oklahoma is really pressing here to make this interesting down the stretch. And it sounds like the Sooners are at least encouraged about the direction this is heading, as a couple of pending decisions here between Clay and Gross are hanging out there.
100%. You said Clay is he set for the 11th?
Yes. So he'll be on July 11th,
which is next Friday.
Yes. So we'll be podcasting, I would assume, before.
Yeah.
That.
And Gross doesn't have a decision date set just yet.
Correct. He has said early July was the preference. However, it has been interesting talking to a lot of folks out there behind the scenes. Gross has become a little bit difficult to access by schools and media. So I think a lot is getting worked through currently, and everyone is kind of holding their breath with him. And then I do want to mention Chase Campbell. He does not have a decision date set either, but he's supposed to tell us at 24/7 Sports when that's going to happen. He just dropped his top 3. And so whatever that date would be, whenever that's revealed, I think Oklahoma fans have every right to be very curious about the timing of that announcement.
Absolutely. Stay plugged in. Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma247sports.com. Obviously, some big decisions there. Like Collin said, the next kind of week or two sounds like the wide receiver picture going to become much, much clearer in 2026. As far as some other names, I mean, I've kind of mentioned a few times the last several shows, there are a lot of decisions of interest, in the first half of July. Don't have to get into all of them because we'll like we were kind of just saying, we'll podcast again before some of them come around. But some other decisions that are coming up, Collin, that should be of intrigue to Oklahoma fans here coming up in the next week or so. There's a lot in July. A lot of guys come off the board, as it typically does. July's a busy month for decisions being made. Some names and decisions that Oklahoma fans should be dialed into here coming up. That could be some good news potentially for the Sooners.
Yeah, I mean, like Josh mentioned, we'll have probably another round of this type of talk next week with a couple of key decisions hanging out there.
Yeah.
But the guys that I wanted to mention right off the top, Braden Presley, Bixby defensive back, is going to make his decision later today as we record here in the morning of.
Yeah, we were hoping that it would maybe be early enough that we could slip it in, but he's afternoon, it sounds like.
Yeah, and as much as Josh and I wanted to hang out virtually on the 4th of July, I think we both made the decision to go about our separate ways. I would be pretty shocked, surprised maybe. I should rephrase. I wouldn't say shocked, but I would be pretty surprised if Oklahoma ended up winning that one out. I think that one is leaning Oklahoma State. But a couple others hanging out there that are worth bringing up at this time, specifically July 7th decisions. And that being Braxton Lindsey, the linebacker out of the state of Arkansas, and then Tyler Ruxer, the tight end out of the state of Indiana. Kicking it off with Lindsey, we've talked about this guy a lot, so I don't need to necessarily dive back into his whole recruiting dynamic, but Oklahoma is in a really good place at linebacker. They have looked at Lindsey as someone who could potentially round out their class at that position.
Yeah.
And he's one of the more preferred prospects on the board. That being said, and I've talked about this in the past as well, BYU is a big threat here. And I think down the stretch, not only is it a Oklahoma BYU battle, I think at this point, a few days out from the decision, obviously I won't be podcasting again before that announcement. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes either way. I think BYU is a serious contender here. They have been for a long time. When we were out at Under Armour Nashville a couple months ago, Tom Loy, national recruiting analyst, and I talked to Braxton, and we really got the impression that the Cougars were potentially the leader at that time. And then, oh, by the way, BYU goes out and gets a 5-star quarterback in Ryder Lyons.
Yeah.
And look, Braxton Lindsey loves Oklahoma. He's got a lot of connections to Oklahoma. Nate Dreiling has built a relationship. Brent Venables has built a relationship, and he understands the linebacker style opportunity that presents itself in Norman. But he is a LDS mission guy, and BYU is a program on the up, and getting a 5-star quarterback in the class is a big deal. And then, oh, by the way, and again, it's always tricky talking about this stuff, but BYU is willing to spend money. BYU is aggressive in today's NIL rev share market. And I think that matters for someone that they probably view as their top linebacker target at this time. So BYU, Oklahoma there. Again, BYU gets him, wouldn't be shocked. Oklahoma gets him, wouldn't be surprised either. Do you have something that you wanted to add on him?
Well, yeah, I just it's interesting because you mentioned good place at linebacker. The last couple cycles have been small, right? I mean, James Nesta and then Marcus James. You already have Ja'Cory Smith and Bo Jandro right here in Bo's the linebacker, right? I get the mix up. Bo Jandro's the linebacker. Nico's the
yes.
So you potentially, if you add Lindsey, that's three guys. When you've only had one each the last two cycles. Just kind of interesting, kind of almost like a replenishing of the position in 26, if that's the way it goes. And that's also a really good, crop. Obviously, we talked a lot about Ja'Cory Smith and his upside. And then the Jandro brothers both are, lower rated, but very Venables guys, not like a ton of upside there. So yeah, Lindsey to that. That's an exciting linebacker group if that's the way it goes. And again, it just sticks out to me because, again, they've only signed one linebacker each of the two cycles. So to then go get three potentially in 26, it jumps out to me a little bit.
Yeah. And I think if you're Oklahoma and you get Braxton Lindsey and you get Bo Jandro, Braxton Lindsey, and Ja'Cory Smith, then you're ecstatic.
Yeah. Right.
I will say if you're Oklahoma and you miss on Braxton Lindsey, which is a very real possibility, of course, you feel good about the idea that, okay, maybe Bo Jandro is kind of like and this is just me podcasting, but maybe Bo Jandro is kind of like the Mike take, Ja'Cory Smith is the Will take, and then Nico Jandro fits the mold of your cheetah position, which is an extension of the linebacker core. And Nico was taken specifically because he's an ideal fit for what that cheetah position is asked to do. And so you kind of have three linebackers already. It's just how you see it. And I think that if you do add Braxton, that potentially lets someone like a Ja'Cory Smith maybe get a look at cheetah. You never know with this stuff. But all that to say, basically what I'm trying to say here is that regardless of Lindsey being added in the mix or not, like Oklahoma has the puzzle pieces already kind of laid out at linebacker.
Sure.
So then there's Mr. Ruxer.
Sure.
So tight end recruit out in the Midwest, going to be making his decision on the 7th as well. I think I said this before, but I think Oklahoma's the leader here. And I really think Oklahoma is best positioned to close this one out. I want to say programs in the mix are West Virginia, Indiana, a couple others out there in the Midwest to the East Coast. And Ruxer, to me, is someone who he's kind of like a cherry on top kind of prospect. Like if Oklahoma doesn't get him, I don't think it's any sweat off their back. If they get him and they put Ruxer and Ryder mixed together, I love that tight end haul. I really do, because in Ryder mix, I think you have someone who is a willing, capable blocker who has receiver upside. And then if you're stacking him, who can be more of like a 2-point-H blocking style or hand in the ground type, with a athlete like Ruxer, who at one point was playing corner in his young high school career.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy has a ton of receiver chops, and those two feel like a duo that can feed off of each other very well. And you've seen Oklahoma in the past, whenever they have tight ends with complementary skill sets, the offense traditionally gets expanded. And I think Ben Arbuckle would love to have kind of those almost like Swiss Army knife complementary pieces in those two tight ends. So Ruxer coming up again. I actually feel a little bit better about Oklahoma standing with him. Not to say that I don't think Oklahoma's well positioned for someone like Lindsey, but of the two making their decision on the 7th, I think Oklahoma is rightfully optimistic about what could be coming down the wire with Ruxer.
No, I'm with you. I know tight end is a hot button topic, and there's so much pessimism there with that position. But I like the combo of Mix and Ruxer also, if that's the way that goes. I know that it's not like a Devon Mitchell, like can't miss guy on paper, but both guys, tons of upside. Mix has been committed forever, right? And he's a guy who just keeps developing and getting better. getting bigger. You put Ruxer with him in that cycle. That's a nice little duo there in 26. And I still, I mentioned a few times, but Trey Washington, who they just signed, I feel like there's a lot of upside there with him too. Like the position is not, again, this upcoming season, like, is anyone going to step up? I don't know, right? I mean, I think it's fair. But the future of the position is not in a horrendous place. Like, there actually is some young guys, both that they have on the team now, as well as potentially in this cycle, and at the very least with Ryder Mix, that I think are worth getting excited about, at least the potential there. So interesting to keep up with there and see if Ruxer can jump in with Mix for Joe John Finley in 2026. You said that's the 7th, which is, trying to do some math, I think that's, what is that, Monday? I think that's Monday. Mm-hmm. So busy Monday, a couple of decisions coming up. Be sure to be plugged into Sooners Illustrated. And then I'll be back with Collin, later next week to react probably to both of those decisions one way or another later next week. Is there anything else in 2026 before we move to 2027 that you wanted to bring up? I want to make sure we get you the opportunity to do so if so.
I think that I should mention Ryder Mix. Like, I should, maybe the better way to portray him is like just a really high floor. What you're getting at the tight end position guy. And so that's why you take the swing on someone like Ruxer, who maybe has a little bit more variance, but maybe a higher ceiling because of some of the athletic ability there. And so it's Oklahoma taking a calculated shot. Outside of that, though, obviously there are a ton of other decisions hanging out there. Like I mentioned, we're still hovering around potential commitment territory for Davian Gross. And then, I mean, there are some guys that maybe could make the final call around this time. But the last thing I will say is God bless America for no, at least scheduled July 4th commitments.
I know. It used to be you have like 10.
I think, knock on wood, that I might actually be able to enjoy the 4th of July this year. Of course, I'm probably going to eat those words, but that being said, I think Oklahoma fans will be able to kick back and relax as well. So we will celebrate not only the 4th of July, but a clean slate on that day as well.
Yeah, there were a couple of cycles there where it became a thing to commit on the 4th of July, and Oklahoma was getting 4 or 5 guys sometimes on the 4th, and we've moved away from that, which I think that's good for everyone. That's good for everyone. Nobody needs to be plugged into recruiting commitments on the 4th. Just kick back a little bit.
When I was a young man first starting out in this industry, and there were several 4th of July decisions, let's just say that on more than one occasion, I was navigating that day not in the most capable of mind, if you will. Maybe a little bit sunburnt from being off of a boat somewhere, and suddenly I'm in one of my buddies' apartments pounding out stories and making sure things are going up in a timely manner. And to this day, let's just say I'm still not sure how I effectively navigated those days. So I'm glad that now, especially in my older age, if you will, I can relax. That being said, Josh, obviously 2026, everyone's talking about it. I'm really excited about what we're getting ready to talk about next, because I had a blast talking to a lot of these young recruits here in 2027.
Absolutely. Before we go, for sure, like you said, you were down in College Station. You referenced it. Big 7-on-7 tournament down there in Texas, state championships. You got a chance to get with some 2027 guys. Obviously, all the focus on 2026. We just talked about a bunch of names, but getting into that next cycle a little bit here in 2027. I know you had some updates you want to get into there after your weekend down in College Station, getting a sunburn. Some names for you in 2027 that you think should be brought up. You've been really good. I want to say, I'm trying to find the right way to word it. Not that it gets lost in the shuffle, but you're always, when we kind of start getting a cycle or two ahead, if you go back and look at some old pods, Collin has brought up some names that have come up and been very of note, down the road. So perk up here with these 2027 kids. Who you got that you were able to see or talk to down there in College Station that you wanted to bring up here on the program today?
Well, if not perked up now, this name will definitely get it done. Let's talk about Cooper Witten, 2027 5-star linebacker, safety recruit out of Argyle Liberty Christian, the son of none other than a household favorite of mine. I actually have this guy up on my wall behind this laptop on a big picture I've got of Dallas Cowboys legends. Jason Witten, the father of Cooper. And I think for a long time, where I think you have to start is when Cooper Witten first emerged onto the scene. It's always funny, everyone's got something to say about these rankings. And when 24/7 Sports dropped the initial 2027 top 100, Cooper Witten was already in 5-star territory. And everyone said, oh, it's just because he's Jason Witten's son. First of all, what a wild stance to take. Jason Witten's son, a Hall of Fame tight end. Regardless, though, you fast forward to today, and I kid you not. Let me just read this off so I get it correctly. On Saturday during knockout play, so not even factoring in the day before when I watched, Cooper ball out. I mean, Cooper Witten at one point on Saturday during this tournament recorded 5 offensive touchdowns in 3 games and had a 2-game run of 3 interceptions. So
that'll work.
I mean, and this is what's awesome too. So when you're out there, I actually heard Mike Roach talk about this the other day on the 105 podcast. Again, another pod you should listen to once you're done listening to us. Roach and I go out there every year. And what's awesome about these tournaments is like the state, high school coaches, these players who maybe aren't like elite recruits, but they play for high-level programs in the state of Texas. They all come together. And this is when you see these guys stamp the best in the state because they all suddenly flock to certain fields or they start talking about certain players.
Yeah.
The guys that everyone was talking about, Jermaine Bishop, Jalen Lott, 2 of the best in 2026, and then Cooper Witten. There was a guy on South Oak Cliff's team, a player who I think at one point shouted out, "That's Jason Witten's son. He's big as heck," and had a couple other choice words to say about Cooper Witten. Cooper is his own guy. Like, yeah, he really is his own guy. And why I feel that's important. When this recruiting process started, now getting into the recruitment, I think everyone just assumed he was going to Tennessee, right? Dad's alma mater. He's going to go. I am actually led to believe that Tennessee will be in a pretty heated recruitment moving forward because of the way some of the other programs out there have acknowledged the fact that Cooper Witten is his own guy. Mm-hmm. And I believe of that group is Oklahoma because OU was his first offer ever, which big deal. And then something we haven't talked about a ton here on the show is on June 15th, the contact period hit for the 2027 cycle, which meant at midnight that morning, coaches across the country could officially openly contact recruits in 2027. Yeah. And Cooper told me in an interview that I'm getting ready to drop on the site that I believe at 12:01, Cooper Witten was put in a group chat with the entire Oklahoma staff. And that matters, right? Yeah, I mean, he told me, he was like, they were the first to offer me. I've always had a lot of love for Oklahoma. Obviously, Cooper's dad, Jason, and a guy named DeMarco Murdy are pretty tight for some stuff they used to do back in the old days. But Oklahoma immediately, upon the beginning of the contact period, was like, hey, man, we all want you really bad. And I think Oklahoma, I think Notre Dame, I think Ohio State, I think Clemson, I think Texas A&M, a lot of these other programs are making it clear, like, they're going to try and pry this guy away from Tennessee. And I think that whether it's Oklahoma or a number of others, there's a real opportunity to do so now that his recruitment is kind of stepping into the spotlight. But again, too, like, great kid, really fun recruitment we're getting ready to follow, and just a awesome player to watch. Like, genuinely one of my favorites to watch play the game because he's already really special, just like his dad was.
A tight end safety combo. That tells you he's a freak right there. Obviously, yeah, his dad, the DeMarco Murray connection. We were just talking about, the upside of tight end kind of recruiting right now for Oklahoma. I mean, it goes without saying that's a humongous fish and one that if Oklahoma can position themselves to really be in the mix for would be obviously huge. So a fun one there. Where'd you say you played his high school football at?
Liberty Christian in Argyle. And I went out there last year to watch him.
Yeah, right. That's why I was curious if you got to see him. Yeah.
Oh, he got his offer at one of the OU camps too that we were at, and I remember watching him make a play. He was the first up in one-on-ones. He had a great play in coverage, and I thought, all right, like he's got it. And then last year watching him, I told this story a ton. I don't think I told it on the pod though. Last year I was like, all right, let me go watch Cooper because it lined up perfectly to where Liberty Christian. I would be lying to you if I said I went to a ton of private school games. Just not. You're not going to see me on very many private school sidelines. But Liberty Christian was playing Parish Episcopal in one of the biggest games of the year in Taps. And if I remember correctly, it was like a fractured clavicle or a broken clavicle that Cooper was dealing with. And the storyline of all the Taps publications, there are so many out there that cover private level. They were all like on the beat going, is Cooper Witten going to play in the game of the year at Taps? And I hit Cooper up on the down low. I was like, yo, I'm not going to say anything, but are you playing? Because I kind of need to know if I'm coming. Yeah, right. And Cooper was like, dude, I'm playing. And he played in the biggest game of the year, fresh off of a major injury, and didn't just play, like dominated on both sides of the ball. He plays receiver. I want to say a little bit of like quarterback, maybe on special teams, but he's obviously a safety and linebacker as well. He's going to be playing inside linebacker this year for Liberty Christian. And that's where I believe Oklahoma likes him the most. He did specify that OU hasn't labeled his offer specifically, but yeah, man, I got down the rabbit hole the other day. I'm not going to lie to you, where one of our board members asked me for a home game recommendation for Salina because they want to go see Bo Bentley.
Sure.
I started diving through the high school football schedules, man. I've got the itch. And Josh, we may have to get you out there because, believe it or not, preseason scrimmage, Salina scrimmages Liberty Christian, which means Bo Bentley versus Cooper Witten. That might be the Sooners Illustrated camera crew heading out there for that one. But I digress. All right, let me I guess I'll go rapid fire for a couple of others, and then Josh, if anyone you want to expand on. Definitely want to lead off here with Pflugerville Weiss wide receiver Trey Moore. So this one's someone we're probably going to get ready to talk about a lot. Here's the background. You ready for this one, Josh? Son of two former Power 4 athletes. Dad, Eric Moore, played quarterback at Oklahoma in the late 90s. Back when, they weren't very good, but he played for them. So he played quarterback at Oklahoma. His brother used to play for Oral Roberts on the basketball team in the state of Oklahoma. He is now at Tulane, transferred over. Also has a brother who plays running back at Oklahoma Baptist. So trio of former or current connections to the state of Oklahoma.
Sure.
Mom played volleyball at Alabama. So needless to say, mom and dad were going to have a Power 4 athlete when they were ready to have kids. And they're already a family of athletes. And then he has an uncle who played receiver at Texas Southern and then played a few years in the NFL for the Patriots and Jags. So this guy comes from about as athletic of a family as there is. I think what I would tell you, though, to know about Trey Moore, yes, his dad played at Oklahoma, played quarterback, all these other things. The best thing I can say about Trey Moore is that when I'm on the recruiting trail or I'm at the 7-on tournaments, I kid you not, there are families, trainers, coaches that when they see the 24/7 gear on me, which I'm starting to wear less and less at these events, they will walk up and everyone's got their takes, right? And they will go, this receiver is better than so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And yet on more than one occasion, Josh, they'll go, he may not be better than Trey Moore, but he's better than so-and-so and so-and-so, which pretty impressive. Oklahoma's in the mix for Trey. They offered him with his dad, Eric Moore, on campus. Pretty cool. And then what you need to know about Trey Moore as well, how about a little airtime for the legend Caleb Kelly, fellow CK out there in the Sooner sphere, if you will. He's a family friend of the Moores, and I believe Trey and Caleb went on a service trip to Haiti back in the day. And so there's a connection there as well. And then Emmett Jones, his numerous connections to the Dallas area. Eric Moore, Trey's dad, played at Skyline, Dallas Skyline, and a proud program down this way. And so that's a name to know. Others quickly of note, Peyton Miller, four-star offensive lineman from Anna. He's another one that was put in a group chat with the entire Oklahoma staff on June 15th. Mm-hmm. Really talented player. Clemson, Texas A&M, Florida, Michigan, Ohio State, Texas Tech. I mean, the list goes on and on for him. Oklahoma likes him a lot. Talon Mayo, four-star corner at Louisville, a guy who knows Jaden Hardy, Michael Fasusi, Sean Hutton all very well, but also is friends with Marion Robinson because they were in the same club 7-on-7 organization. Talon Mayo has Oklahoma in the mix early with LSU, Ohio State, a couple other heavy hitters.
Yeah.
Also at Louisville, Derek Martin. His dad, we're talking a lot of bloodlines today on the show. His dad is a two-time Super Bowl champion and played in the NFL with the Ravens, Packers, Giants, Patriots, and Bears. He has an Oklahoma offer. Hasn't heard from OU a ton since he got that offer, but OU is in there for another Louisville guy. And again, these Louisville guys, and I will give Sean Hutton credit. When Sean was playing at Louisville, he said, hey, you're going to look at this guy and you're going to be surprised when I tell you this, but that's one of the next ones up at Louisville. So a name to know. I was pleasantly surprised by Jeremiah Douglas, the 27 wide receiver out of Crandall. Oklahoma got a Crandall recruit not too long ago in Sammy Omasigo.
That's right.
Another program familiar. I really enjoyed watching Jeremiah Douglas's game. Oklahoma has an offer in for him. And then I think I'll round it out with Jaden Fields at Hutto. Shout out my guy, Eli Reinhardt, the new head coach for the Hippos. He brought me a shirt. He brought me a shirt at Texas State 7. I almost wore it on the show today, but it's dirty. It's in the laundry. I will probably wear it soon, Josh, because it's the one shirt I've always wanted. It is a hippo protruding into the state of Texas. That is their logo.
That sounds awesome.
It's a roaring hippo in the state. I'll wear that shirt here pretty soon. But Jaden Fields, going to get coached by my guy Ryan Hart and all those guys out there in Hutto. Really talented player, man. I mean, another fun story here for the pod. Jaden Fields is the kind of guy who showed up to a ton of summer camps and got a ton of offers to the point where he went to Oklahoma's camp, dominated, got the offer. Went to SMU's camp. I'm led to believe that SMU offered him, pulled him into some of the coaches' offices so they could not only recruit him, but also make sure that other schools weren't taking away their time to recruit him. And then he goes to A&M, Josh, and this is awesome. Jaden Fields goes to Texas A&M, and I was told he was doing so well at both defensive back and receiver that kind of on accident, A&M's defensive backs coach and wide receivers coach each tried to offer him separately. They did not know that the other was trying to offer. And so Jaden Fields really talented DB that Oklahoma is now involved in. A couple of sources I talked to think that OU is going to be in the mix here with A&M. And then if Texas gets involved, that'll be a major player. He has the makings of someone who could be kind of like a regional 3 recruiting battle long term.
Sure.
And so a name to know there as well. But had a blast out at College Station. Did not end up folding. I'm still physically recovering, but I'm glad I'm still here today and tell the story of a lot of these 2027 recruits. A lot of fun guys to watch and follow.
No, and Collin's had lots of great intel over on the site, Oklahoma247sports.com. And like I mentioned a little bit ago, file those names away. At least a handful of those, if not all of them, are going to wind up being big name players we're talking about this time next year. And if you are plugged in now to both the site and the show, then you'll be in on them early, and you can sound really smart when you talk to your friends about these guys. Be like, I knew he was good in summer of 26. Also love the Hippos. That's incredible. I mean, more teams need to be the Hippos.
I will
sports.
I will wear the Huddle Hippo shirt on the pod next week, probably.
Yeah,
I gotta make sure. My guy Reinhardt did me a favor. He got me a shirt that's a little bit tighter fitting, so I got to go to the gym before I wear it and get a pump, so I can fill out the shirt well. But I told Coach Reinhardt this. There's an argument to make of every game I will cover in the fall. The day that I get to go cover a Hutto Hippos game for the first time in my career is going to be like hitting the finish line. You know what I mean? I genuinely cannot wait. And I told Coach Reinhardt, I was like, next time you see me, either you're going to give me 8 more of those Hutto Hippos t-shirts, or I'm buying out the entire town Walmart and I'm bringing everybody a Hutto Hippos t-shirt out in the Oklahoma space. So stay tuned.
It's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Maybe we'll do a raffle here on the show. I'll go buy a Hutto Hippos t-shirt. And some listener or viewer out there, I will send them a Hutto Hippos t-shirt.
100%.
They partake. You
have to leave a review on the podcast or something for sure. I would do it for a Hutto Hippos shirt for sure. Some merch. I think that's it.
I got you one.
Oh yeah, please. I think that's it. We've had a lot to get into, and we'll continue to do so in the month of July. Busy recruiting month continuing. Like we touched on earlier, a couple of big decisions coming up early next week. And maybe more. We'll see what happens between now and next week. But at the very least, a couple of new names to get into on the program next Thursday. So be sure to want to be tuned in. I'll be back with James and Tom on Monday. Actually, Tom's going to be out of town. So it'll be James and I on Monday. Catch up on some other things. We do have some Diamond Sports portal stuff to get into that we'll do on Monday. Back with Collin later next week to hit on all the latest on the recruiting side as busy times continuing to churn. More decisions coming. More names to get into. And some decisions to preview next week as well that we'll do on the program next week. So be sure to tune in then. That's it for now. Have a very good 4th of July weekend, wherever you may be headed, wherever you may be doing. Be safe, be smart, all that good stuff. And we'll catch up with you next week. For Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway signing up for now. We'll see you next time right back here on Sooners Illustrated.